Hello everybody, welcome to the second week of Sunday School at Home with Christine Oltianu. This week I will be posting two videos, one on women saints who were in the royal family and another on men saints who were warriors. This video will be on women saints who were in the royal family. It was inspired by my watching of some classical Disney films and finding that the stories of many of the saints within the Orthodox Church were far more interesting than the stories that these Disney movies were based off of. And I thought that I'd share a few of these stories with you today. The first saint I would like to cover today is Mother Alexandra, the former Princess Ileana of Romania. I will be getting the information from this video from the Orthodox Monastery of the Transfiguration. This monastery was founded in 1967 by Mother Alexandra, whose dream it was to provide a place where American Orthodox women from all ethnic backgrounds could come to live in the monastery lifestyle and benefit from the liturgical cycle in English. The desire of her heart was to provide a fountain of spiritual refreshment to the people of the country that gave her a home after her exile. Princess Ileana was born the youngest daughter of King Ferdinand and Queen Marie. She was born in Bucharest, Romania in 1909. During her childhood, she lived through the harsh realities of World War I with her mother and sisters. She would visit the soldiers in the hospitals and troop trains, praying with them. She also helped the Red Cross as an interpreter for one of the American colonels distributing supplies. In 1931, Ileana was married to Archduke Anton Habsburg of Austria. She gave birth to 6 children over the course of 10 years in Austria. During World War II, their castle in Austria was the first used as a housing for German troops. Later, she turned it into a Red Cross hospital. In 1944, she returned to Romania, to Brand Castle, which she inherited from her mother. She established a new hospital, the Hospital of the Queen's Heart, across the castle in memory of her mother, to serve soldiers, villagers, and anyone in need of medical attention. In 1947, she, with her whole family, was exiled from Romania by the communists, being told they could leave the country with whatever they could carry or be confined in a monastery until they were executed. They lived in Switzerland for a short time before moving to Argentina. In 1950, Ileana was given a medical visa to come to the United States. In 1951, separating from Anton, she came with her 4 youngest children, the oldest 2 already being in the U.S. for their studies, and settled in a suburb of Boston. The then Senator John F. Kennedy introduced a bill in Congress to give her permanent residency. To provide for her family, she accepted many speaking engagements around the United States, talking about her life and the evils of communism. In 1961, with the blessing of the Metropolitan Anthony Bloom, she began testing her calling to monastic life and entered the monastery of the Protecting Veil of the Mother of God in Bussy, France. She remained in this monastery for 6 years, visiting the United States each summer to maintain her permanent residency status. While she was here, she would teach at the Romanian Vatra about orthodoxy and monasticism, and it became clear to her that Americans needed an English-speaking monastery for women. In 1964, in the property here in Elwood City, PA, she was purchased, and in 1967, after Sister Ileana was tonsured into the monastic life as Mother Alexandra, she returned to Elwood City to remain and establish the Orthodox Monastery of the Transfiguration. She lived to see communism fall in Romania in 1989, and she was able to make a return to her homeland in 1990. Mother Alexandra reposed in the Lord on January 21, 1991, and is buried in the monastery cemetery, She requested the following verse be on her gravestone: "None of us live to himself, and none of us die to himself. If we live unto the Lord, and if we die unto the Lord. So then, whether we live or we die, we are the Lord's." Romans 4:7. The second saint I will be covering in this video is Saint Elizabeth, the New Martyr of Russia, commemorated on July 5th. Saint Elizabeth was an older sister of the Empress Alexandra of Russia, and was married to the Grand Duke Sergei, a younger son of Tsar Alexander III, and governor of Moscow. She converted from the Protestant faith to Orthodoxy several years after her marriage, of her own free will, and organized women from all levels of society to help the sick and needy. Grand Duke Sergei was killed by an assassin's bomb on February 4th, 1905, just as St. Elizabeth was leaving for her workshops. She visited her husband's killer in prison and urged him to repent, giving him an icon. She eventually built a shrine over the site of her husband's martyrdom, which was said to have been destroyed by Vladimir Lenin himself in 1917. After her husband's murder, she began to withdraw from her former social life. She founded the Convent of St. Martha and St. Mary in Moscow, a community of nuns which focused on worshiping God and helping the poor. She sold all her fine clothes and jewels and moved out of her palace into the buildings that she had purchased on behalf of the convent. Saint Elizabeth and her sisters continued to visit the poor and hungry in Moscow. During the first years of the World War, she nursed the sick and wounded soldiers in the hospitals and on the battlefront. She was respected and admired throughout Russia, and people came to her for spiritual direction. After her brother-in-law, Tsar Nicholas, abdicated the throne, and he and his family were placed under house arrest, Saint Elizabeth was urged to abandon her convent and seek shelter with her remaining family in Western Europe. She refused all offers of help, saying that she would not abandon her sisters and would die in Russia if that was the Lord's will. On Pascha 1918, Soviet soldiers came to the convent and ordered her to leave Moscow to join the royal family near Ekaterinburg. She was allowed to leave with the novice, Sister Barbara, but was not permitted to say goodbye to the other sisters. After arriving in Ekaterinburg, St. Catherine was denied access to the Tsar's family. She and Sister Barbara were placed in a convent where she was warmly received by the sisters. At the end of May, St. Elizabeth and St. Barbara were moved to a nearby village of Alopeysk with the Grand Dukes Sergius, John, and Constantine, and the young Count Vladimir Paley. They were all housed in a schoolhouse at the edge of the town. St. Elizabeth was placed under guard, but was permitted to go to church and work in the garden. On the night of July 5th, they were all taken to a place in the woods 12 miles from Alopeysk and executed. Grand Duke Sergius was shot, but the others were thrown down a mine shaft, with grenades being tossed in after them. St. Elizabeth lived for several hours and could be heard singing hymns by local villagers who came up to the mine shaft after the murderers had left. A few days later, the bodies of St. Elizabeth and St. Barbara were recovered from the mine shaft after the pro-Tsarist armies took Alopeysk, and they were ultimately taken to Jerusalem in 1920 and buried in the Church of St. Mary Magdalene on the Mount of Olives. The third saint covered in this video will be St. Helen. I am reading from www.greekboston.com. Saint Helen, also referred to as the Holy and Right-Believing Empress Helen, equal to the Apostles, was one of the saints of the early Orthodox Church. Constantine the Great, who is also recognized with her as being equal to the Apostles, was her son. She was born in 248 AD, and she died in 239 AD. Not much is known about her early life, but it is commonly believed she was born in a place called Drepanum, which was later renamed Helenopolis. At the time of her birth, she was a daughter of a simple innkeeper. There is also not much known about how she came to be the mother of an emperor, but legend stated that she was raised as if she were a queen, and then married off to Britain to prevent war. Besides that, she is known for her absolute faith and piety. Around 290 A.D., the emperor, her husband, divorced her to marry another. It is Helen's son who eventually became emperor and had a close relationship with his mother. She raised him in the Orthodox faith. It is largely held that she made many pilgrimages to holy and religious sites in Palestine and other places to the east. She is also credited with finding the cross that Christ was crucified on. The fourth saint covered in this video will be Saint Sunniva of Norway, who is commemorated on July 8th. Saint Sunniva was born in the 10th century and is a patron saint of the Norwegian Diocese of Bjørgvin, as well as all of western Norway. She was heir of an Irish kingdom but had to escape with her brother and others when a pagan king who wanted to marry her invaded. She and her companions became shipwrecked off the coast of Norway, but eventually landed on Silje Island, where they took refuge in a cave. The local people suspected them of stealing their sheep and demanded that they be arrested. Sunniva prayed to God that they should not fall into the hands of the heathens, upon which rocks fell down, blocking the entrance to the cave. Sunniva and her companions died in the cave, but in the years to come miracles were reported on the island. When King Olaf Tryggvason excavated the cave in 1996, the body of Sunniva was found intact. Later, a monastery, Silje Abbey, was built on the site, the ruins of which can still be seen. During the fires in Bergen in 1170 to 71 and in 1198, Sunniva's remains were taken from the monastery and placed near the flames. This action halted the advance of the fire, and it was hailed as a miracle. The fifth and final saint featured in this video is Saint Olga of Kiev. I will be reading from Encyclopedia Britannica. Saint Olga, also called Helga or Saint Olga of Kiev, was born in about 890 and died in about 969. Kiev. Her feast day is celebrated on July 11th. She was the first recorded female ruler of Russia and the first member of the ruling family of Kiev to adopt Christianity. She was canonized as the first Russian saint of the Orthodox Church and is now the patron saint of widows and converts. Olga was the widow of Igor I, Prince of Kiev, who was assassinated in 945 by his subjects while attempting to get taxes. Because Igor's son Sviatoslav was still a minor, Olga became regent of the Grand Principality of Kiev. From 945 to 964, she soon had Igor's murderers scalded to death and hundreds of members of their Slavic tribe killed. Olga then became the first of the princely Kievans to adopt Orthodox Christianity. She was probably baptized in about 957 at Constantinople, then the most powerful patriarchate. Her efforts to bring Christianity to Russia were resisted by her son, but continued by her grandson, the great Prince Saint Vladimir. Together they mark the transition between pagan and Christian Russia. Thank you for watching this far. If you would like to do a coloring page for any of these saints, I have links in the description below, and if you're really proud of your work and you'd like to show me, feel free to send a picture to my email.